Experimental or just mental? When they say the lunatics are running the asylum, you know it's getting bad. But it does seem rather as though they have been in charge for quite some time. But did a classic switcheroo, making average normal people think they were the crazy ones and needed helping, by the lunatics themselves no less. And people fell for it, because those telling you that you were mad were the ones wearing suits and white coats, after being conditioned to accept and trust those suits, uniforms and coats of course, and while they provided you with a straitjacket, known as society, to snugly fit around you and tie you in, now looking to get us in padded cells and, well and truly, under their care. I've already covered a number of sinister experiments and enterprises unleashed on the unsuspecting public in An Experiment But a Big One, of deliberately contaminating things, spraying things into the skies in the 50s, accidentally infecting people with strange man-made germs or simian viruses in the 50s and 60s, more over the coming decades for other things they decided were out there, causing untold grief and pain to millions of people under the guise of "we need to test it" or "it's for your safety." There is always more to know though, and sometimes it's important for people to understand the types of people and their mentalities that set up and run these institutes. Those who are capable of severe levels of cruelty and are so lacking in compassion, it really is quite shocking. But they are firmly among us, so best to know. After watching a documentary about an urban myth, which started one line of thought and an article, I couldn't help being horrified for some of the other things I learnt after reading up on the main place featured. Willowbrook, a hospital for disabled and mentally impaired children. There is footage showing the terrible and dire conditions that children were in, and being kept in as an official facility, with public access. So, a now famous TV presenter sneaked in with cameras to try and blow the lid off it, they say, yet it took a further 15 or so years to close it down, or get attention towards it. But it helped his career greatly, it is said. But it was shocking to see generally. Shocking to know it was 1972 it was filmed, showing how we think of the Victorian era for that type of thing. Yet it was flourishing and probably still is. They didn't close that place until 1987, and it's heartbreaking when you read about it as well. I'll just lay it out as there is no good way to say it. They deliberately infected the children with hepatitis, then made other children drink chocolate milk with the feces of the infected children to try and infect them that way. Now, if you really told people that's how they test these medicines and drugs they give people, would they still go along with it? We all know they test on animals, but mostly turn a blind eye to that shockingly too. Even after the pictures of beagles having their heads eaten alive by sandflies, courtesy of Faust himself, Fauci. But there are others too, as it was Willard Graylin and his bio-emporiums of living cadavers idea that should be enough to scare people into awareness. Because he wanted them so he could have body parts to use, and could avoid using mentally retarded children. But there are multiple incidents of them deliberately infecting people. The Tuskegee study, for example, where the people doing it knew exactly what they were doing. And I'm sure they were told it was for the greater good, and it will save lives, as a cover to help their conscience, if they had one, just as they do today. As with other incidences of pretending to help, turning up in white coats pushing products to get people off natural remedies, powdered milk instead of breast milk, shots as soon as you were born, top-ups throughout your life. Don't worry, it's all for that greater good. But as I've mentioned before, you need to start analysing that and wondering whose greater good they actually mean. There are also others where they have used children, mentioned in my article A Rather Dark Enterprise, of the foundling hospitals where they admitted children, tested on them, and many died it seems. The shocking stats are in the article. But why did they die? Where did they go? And it really does go some way to explain why they would need living conditions to be restricted for general folk, making it so they can't afford to keep their children. But no matter, the helpful authorities have a solution. They will offer you money to leave your children with them. They will then provide institutions for them, and therefore need a constant supply. Laws then follow to separate the parent and child bond, legally and emotionally, and the next generation become more state chattel rather than free human. And now they say they have developed a way to make and grow babies in a pod, as discussed in Pod Life and Pod Life 2. So I wonder if they have decided that they no longer need people to be able to breed so freely as they once did, as they now have enough stock to go it on their own, or the technology to not need so many bodies, living or dead. It's hard to know for sure, and although it isn't pleasant to know or understand these things, I feel that nonetheless they need to be considered. These are some very dark times, and the more you know, the darker it gets.